Is it expected for me to absolutely hate Skyler? I'm watching my way through Breaking Bad for the first time, up to Season 3, Episode 3, and I've been completely avoiding this sub until now to avoid all spoilers. If what I'm about to say is common knowledge, at least you now know why. Basically, I absolutely loathe Skyler White, perhaps more than any other TV character I've ever seen, on a level with Joffrey from GOT. Everything she says, everything she does, and the way she behaves around everyone just makes me want to hit her in the face with a brick. Fair enough, she's been going through some life-altering tough times, but she acts like such a I just want to reach an episode where she gets killed off. No spoilers, please.
I hated her ball-busting, control-freakish, white-bread, housewifey milquetoast ways from the moment I first clapped eyes on her.
I'm a female, and I hate her ever-living guts. When anything tragic happens in her life, I laugh inside. I don't know why my hatred for her is so deep. I think it's her stupid face.
I hate her attitude, I hate her face, I hate her body language, I hate her. She's beyond fucking annoying, to the extent I'm having an issue finishing the series. And I'm only at Season 2.
I hate Skyler so much. Everything she does annoys me, and I generally just hate her so much.
Why couldn't the Mexican cartel come for Skyler instead of Walt or Hank? She is such a loudmouth and just is out to fuck up Walt's life.
The fact that she's always in Walt's business, always getting involved in everything, being so obsessed with what he's doing. Doesn't she just piss everyone off?
She overrules Walt despite what he tries to do to fix their issues, all while having cancer. Anna Gunn is one of those man women. Mannish face, lanky body, man feet. She doesn't change much from start to end. Too bad the kids don't find out the truth about her. Take all that money and tell her how much of a bad shit mother she is.
Your opinion is a common one. Be careful though, because there's always people who like to call you sexist for having that opinion.
Did Skyler White in Breaking Bad do anything wrong? I've just finished rewatching the show, and I'm here to tell you, objectively, no. Okay, so obviously across these 6 seasons of character conflict and intense family drama that make up Breaking Bad, there's plenty of legitimate reasons you can find to wind up disliking Skyler White, the increasingly volatile wife of main character Walt. She starts the show as kind of a snob, being weirdly judgy about her husband smoking weed, despite him having terminal cancer. In one later scene, after a tense encounter, we're shown Skyler smoking a cigarette while pregnant. Throughout the series, she makes impulse decisions that wind up putting her family in direct danger, and of course,
I fucked Ted.
The show is multi-layered, and doesn't have any interest in having any character serve as a clear-cut, morally pure individual. Even Walt Jr. doesn't make it out of the series fully unscathed.
Why you gotta be such a bitch?
Hey.
Fucking die already. Just give up and die.
Jesse is at his core a naive kid with a good heart, but nonetheless frequently makes selfish choices that knowingly hurt those around him. Hank is a dependable family man, but still in the end a bit of a dickhead cop. And Gus is a fabulous chef with a wonderful taste in jumpers, who also threatens to butcher a man's entire family.
I will kill your wife. I will kill your son. I will kill your infant daughter.
For the most part, the fanbase surrounding the show got that, and were able to navigate the muddy emotional waters of the show's cast. Except for Skyler. People really fucking hated Skyler.
Skyler always annoyed me. She loved Walt before he became a drug dealer. Why is that a problem after all his attempts to show her that his family is safe?
I was hoping that Tuco's cousins would come into the house and chop her up.
Negative discussions of the character were so common during the show's initial run that it almost became kind of a meme. She'd regularly top most hated polls, cast and crew alike received myriad complaints about her character, and this pickup artist blog even refers to her as a minger. So today we're going to break up why these people are wrong, why they're partially right, and then why they're wrong again. Let's go!
But you know what, Walt? Someone has to protect this family from the man who protects this family.
Tell us a no, tell us a no, no, tell us a no, 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 tell us a no, no,
Hey folks, this episode has been generously sponsored by NordVPN, an online privacy service serving over 1 million users. In lieu of using my spot just to personally recommend the service, I did want to briefly go over some recent events that I'm sure a fair few of you have heard about. Last month, news broke that last year a NordVPN server had been compromised, and since then there's been a lot of misinformation regarding what's happened and what's being done. The short version is that while there was a temporary breach, this was isolated to a single server, and no sensitive user data was exposed or seized. Nord has a long-held policy against holding user logs. Regardless, since then Nord has been taking many steps to prevent even an isolated incident like this from happening again, conducting a full-scale security audit, building a dedicated committee on cybersecurity, transitioning to 100% fully owned servers, and more that's detailed in the links I've included in the description. I'm not saying this out of any contractual obligation. Hearing that a service I've promoted in the past could have left my viewers at risk was a huge concern to me, so I've been trying to learn as much as possible about this. If this incident has left you skeptical, I don't blame you. But if you're looking for a service to encrypt your data and provide online personal security, I'd still 100% recommend NordVPN. For a limited time, Nord is also offering 70% off of a 3-year plan, as well as 2 extra months of the service for free. So if you're interested, use the offer code JackSaint at nordvpn.com/JackSaint. So I think if you ask the average person who disliked the character of Skyler White why they disliked her, the answer you'll get can usually be summed up by because she was written to be unlikable. Particularly in seasons 2 and 3 of the show, when Skyler hate was at its peak, she's almost always framed as an antagonist to our main characters, somebody trying to get in the way of them succeeding with their various schemes. As I've described, this starts with something as simple as Skyler trying to get Walt to stop associating himself with his shady dealer ex-pupil. Then as it goes on, we get Skyler finding out about Walt's double life as a drug manufacturer, threatening to expose him to the police, forcing him to leave the family home, and just generally preventing Walt from his envisioned dream of leaving a life of luxury to his family. Skyler makes everything harder for our main characters. Aside from early in season 4, wherein she's forced to help Walt with his schemes, or risk having him expose their whole operation. Place your bets for when the fanbase temporarily decided she was actually kind of okay. But, well, I think the reasoning that everyone hated Skyler because she got in Walt's way gets a lot weaker when you realise that also describes almost the entire rest of the show's cast, some of whom are among its most beloved characters. Mike and Hank would probably be the easy examples here, fan favourites who undeniably put Walt through a lot of trouble over the show's run. No, this goes a bit deeper, and I think a good place to start is a close look at one sequence of the show, one that barely ever gets talked about, but I think is actually one of the most impactful across the entire series. It was a scene for me that really cemented the character of Walter White as an almost effortless manipulator. And, as it turns out, was the time a lot of the community decided Skyler was definitely a big fat bitch. Season 3, Episode 3, IFT, starts uncharacteristically with the focus squarely on Skyler as she goes about her daily life. For some context, the finale of the show's previous season had ended with Skyler finally putting all the pieces together, becoming the first person to finally work out Walt's criminal double life. Her response was to get her and her family as far away from him as possible, not only because of how hard he'd deceived those close to him, but because that deception was so he could work one of the most dangerous possible jobs for someone with a wife and kids. So she calls for a divorce, and tells Walt to quietly leave the family home in exchange for not outing him as a secret crime lord, a choice that would risk making her an accessory to his crimes. Except, at the start of this episode, Walt didn't stick to the deal.
Get your restraining order right here! Restrain this!
See, in the last scene of the previous episode, Walt had decided he was fed up of being made to feel like he had done something wrong, breaking back into the house and re-establishing himself as the man of the household. He calls Skyler's bluff. She threatens to call the police, and he tells her to go for it. So, it's watching this scene as it plays out from this point that I think is really interesting. I think it offers a really visceral look at the dynamic between Walt and Skyler, and by extension, the audience. In the past, I've talked about the ways media can frame conflicts between characters in such a way that you can be led to look more sympathetically at one person or the other, even in situations where dialogue or actions should point towards our sympathies being elsewhere. So for example, in the case of musical biopic The Dirt, a band member can beat his girlfriend in the face, but because we're focusing so much on his reaction and immediate regret, it's him we're being drawn to emotionally. That's not really the case here. Pretty pointedly, this tense encounter between Walt and Skyler never gives us a definitive perspective. Shots will either show both characters in emotional conflict, or we'll get close-ups of each, but never one more than the other. As a quick point of reference here, rewatch the scene and consider how much you're really thinking about Walt Jr.'s emotional state after he enters the conversation. Not much, or at least not as much as Skyler and Walt. So, dialogue here is all the audience is really left with. And given that dialogue is almost entirely through characters who know they have to disguise significant parts of the context here, it makes the scene kind of a Rorschach test. You see what you want to see. So, when the police arrive and we see Skyler desperately working out whether to out Walt's crimes while he stands in the back cradling their daughter, if you're sympathetic to Walt, you see Skyler at her worst. Here's Walt desperately trying to re-establish himself as the loving father who only wants his family back together. And here's Skyler trying to get Walt kicked out of the house because of her own moral purity. If you're sympathetic to Skyler, you see all the same things, but you come away feeling the opposite. Here's a guy playing a pantomime version of the father he never really was, knowingly rubbing it into his wife's face that she's in no position to call him out for it. When Walt says,
I haven't been the most attentive husband lately.
You don't just hear the words, but all the bullshit performance behind them. It's a spot-on demonstration of gaslighting behavior, with Walt projecting a heavily skewed version of reality to cast Skyler's perspective into doubt. Hearing the way I've gone over this, you might be tempted to think it's pretty straightforward that Walt is the bad guy here, manufacturing this narrative of him being the regretful father who knows he's done wrong but just wants that one last chance, even though we know full well he doesn't really regret anything he's done, and he is going to keep doing it whether or not Skyler approves. But the response to this scene by fans echoes a lot of the same talking points we heard from Skyler haters earlier. That this is another case of Skyler trying to be an obsessive control freak, getting in the way of Walt as he attempts to keep his life together. Walt Jr. agrees with that summation.
Why you gotta do this to Dad?
As Skyler makes the call not to out Walt in front of his son and daughter, the scene closes out. So, what do we learn? Well, to break that down, I first have to take away any illusion that there's several equally sound perspectives here. Walt is not an earnest, loving family man who made mistakes but wants to make amends. And Skyler is completely justified in every impulse she had to get him as far away from the kids as possible by any means necessary. This is true both from Walt's perspective, who knows full well that rival dealers and thugs had threatened and attempted to kill him repeatedly by this point, and from the audience's. Like, literally at the end of the last episode, we saw 2 cartel members enter the family home with axes, ready to butcher Walt at a moment's notice. This was exactly the kind of situation Skyler feared when she first gave Walter the boot, and it happened moments earlier in the narrative. Yeah, the narrative that Walt was just doing what he thought was best and Skyler was being unreasonably combative went on. Now, was all of this just because of implicit misogyny on the part of the viewers? Yeah. For at least some of the viewers, definitely. As the actor who played Skyler, Anna Gunn, expressed herself in a piece she wrote in 2013 on the subject, there were clearly gendered aspects of the kinds of criticism she received. In her own words,
"A typical online post complained that Skyler was a shrieking, hypocritical harpy and didn't deserve the great life she has. I have never hated a TV show character as much as I hate her," one poster wrote. The consensus among the haters was clear. Skyler was a ball and chain, a drag, a shrew, an annoying bitch wife.
Scenes like the one I just went into were not uncommon in the show at all, especially not as we move into Season 4. The narrative dissonance would only grow between the risks Walt was taking and the danger he was putting his family in, and his dogged insistence that he was keeping them safe and they had nothing to worry about.
You, Junior, Holly, you are completely safe.
One of his most famous moments of badassery, the "I am the danger" speech, is a perfect encapsulation of this. A moment where Skyler questions Walt on the level to which he really has things under control, leading to an authoritative monologue wherein Walt declares that, if anything, he's the one other people should be afraid of.
No, you clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skyler. I am the danger.
A few moments later.
I did not do this! I will kill your infant daughter.
However you shake it, the reality is the same. On basically every occasion we see Skyler nagging, complaining at, disparaging Walt's position, her concerns are absolutely spot on. Hot take. Even what seems to be the most cited example of Skyler being just as bad or even worse than Walt, her sleeping with Ted and then throwing it in Walt's face, was basically the correct move at the time. It was a bold gambit to alienate a man who by his continued actions was only putting his family at greater and greater risk. It was a power move, as much as Walt playing the doting father to paint Skyler as an unreasonable housewife to the police. Except Skyler wasn't unreasonable, and Walt was endangering his family. And the decisions she makes that do put the family in danger? The direct result of Walt's continued ego preventing him from admitting to any problems. So at this point, I guess we're left with two options. That those who continue to hate her character were either not particularly paying attention to the story, or that the reasons they disliked her were not about if her actions were technically correct or justified. Or maybe they're just really pro-weed.
Do not sell marijuana to my husband.
So the question is, what was it that made Skyler so unsympathetic, even if she was right? And it turns out, in the realm of shows about men leading seedy second lives and constantly fucking up while their partners are hated for reasons fully validated by the story, Skyler isn't alone. So Breaking Bad joins a lot of other prestige drama that also involves a lot of dudes gaslighting their partners while living out sordid double lives. The key examples I take here are The Sopranos and Mad Men, and their sad, sad little brother, Dexter. Also Fargo to a lesser extent, and Barry to a lesser extent. All of these series involve, to some degree, male main characters with criminal second lives their wives or girlfriends either know nothing or very little about, and in all those cases, those tensions form a lot of the show's lasting conflict. Except Fargo. They, kind of resolved that one early.
Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
The significant others are left in the dark while the male lead murders, steals, deals, and usually cheats on their partner. And lo and behold, it's those partners that fans tend to wind up hating most.
But it's funny because I have had people go, I can't stand that woman, or I can't stand this, or whatever, and I'm like, but Barry kills people.
Carmela Soprano, and especially Betty Draper, regularly get the same dismissive treatment that Skyler does, often hated by fans and seen as unreasonable, combative, disloyal, and obsessed. To be clear, I don't feel the same way about all these characters. No shade to Betty stans, but I get why people would hate her a lot more than I do with someone like Skyler. Skyler never made her son cry over a sandwich. But this is a pattern. Dudes who are clearly doing some underhanded shit that could easily break apart or put their family in danger, and hate bestowed on the woman of the family as they become increasingly disturbed and aggravated. These emotions are justified. They are rational responses to being kept in the dark about fundamental parts of their partner's lives. But why are they still characterized as the unreasonable, overly emotional, nagging ball and chain bitch as described by Gunn? In simple terms, it's because it's not about doing the right thing. It's about doing what a wife or girlfriend character is expected to do. In the same way Skyler contradicts Walt's invented narrative as either the loving family man or infallible crime lord, these characters contradict their pre-established roles in the story. To be disruptive, to be disloyal, to argue and betray are not bad because they are wrong or irrational choices given their situations, but because those characters should be the opposite. Cooperative, loyal, stalwart supporters of the lead character. Betty Draper was a model of the 50s suburban housewife. That's literally her career prior to marrying Don. She, like these other characters, simply reveals herself to be too human to keep within the strict confines of what she's supposed to be. And, almost compulsively, she is disdained for it. By contrast, these stories are composed of male characters desperately trying to fit within masculine roles.
What does a man do, Walter? A man provides for his family.
It could be something really abstract. Dexter Morgan, clearly contextualized as a genuine psychopath with deep problems, but nonetheless filling that hyper-masculine, Punisher-style, slaughter in the name of good archetype. Or it could be as in-your-face as Don Draper, the slick executive who every dude wants to be and every woman wants to be with. Tony Soprano, the Italian mob boss, and Heisenberg, the feared drug kingpin. Classic roles of masculine dominance and authority.
You're goddamn right.
Within these stories, it doesn't really matter if these characters are right. Don's desperation to conform to this archetype lead to nothing but constant anxiety, alcoholism, and broken relationships with almost every woman in his life. Walt repeatedly refuses clear exits from his dangerous situation in his ruthless desire to maintain an air of supremacy. Less than Igard thinks he's real cool, until he trips and falls into a big hole. These men embody the toxic reality of trying to conform to these unhealthy roles they're told they should aspire to. But by the nature of the fact that the audience is also being fed these roles, a large chunk of them don't see a cautionary tale. In the back of their head, they see men aspiring to be alpha males, and they think to themselves, hey, maybe if he can actually make it, I can too. So even if they're repeatedly shown to be wrong, even if it's constantly demonstrated how destructive and miserable this unending desperate struggle to fit this imagined role is, in the back of their head the audience still cheers them on. Sure, this is mostly going to be men, but it'd be naive to assume all of us aren't just as well taught through media what the ideals of our gender, sexuality, or whatever else are supposed to be. Much as she's the first to identify the reality of Walt's criminal double life, Skyler is the first to see through the illusion of him being motivated by anything but his own feelings of pride, ego, and self-evaluation. In the concluding episode of the show, Walt finally says what anyone who'd really been paying attention would have long since realized.
You need to understand.
I have to hear one more time that you did this for the family.
I did it for me.
When you rewatch Breaking Bad with all of this in mind, It's hard not to see Skyler as a pretty heroic character, particularly in her knowledge that all of her efforts to protect her family would repeatedly lead to her being demonized, and all of her predictions of the negative outcomes of Walt's choices would come to pass exactly. The marriage would crumble, she would be alienated from her son, her family would be broken. In all of Breaking Bad, Skyler chose very little on the basis that it was what made her feel good. And on the rare occasion she did, it would be a constant source of criticism and dismay from viewers. She would frequently let herself look monstrous, or ridiculous, or idiotic, because she wasn't seeking to fit within a role that she found pleasing. She did what she felt was right, genuinely, in a constant effort to protect the one she loved. I'm not somebody who has spent too much of my life trying to fit a rigid masculine ideal, but I have found myself constantly surrounded by male figures who very clearly have. What I see is the same toxic cycle, attempts to reach some level of respect through authority or dominance, that ultimately lead to nothing but disdain and resentment. The problem is, this is not something we can often identify when we're going through it firsthand. The common speculation about when Walt is Walt and when he becomes Heisenberg represents this pretty well. It's hard to really know if this is a face he's adopting, one he's faking, or if it was always under the surface. Ideally, this is what stories like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, and the others I've discussed here can do, allowing us to take a step back and recognize the narratives we're being fed and are unknowingly trying to match up to. Certainly, I think they help me. The trouble is, to do any of this in the case of targeting ideas like toxic masculinity, you first have to depict it, which inevitably attracts those who've never really been forced to think critically about it. I'm sure for many viewers, Breaking Bad was always a rags to riches story of a dying cancer patient becoming a badass crime lord, right up until the show all but beat them in the head that he was wrong. It's been billed from the start as the story of Mr. Chips becoming Scarface. And a lot of dudes still kind of idolize Scarface.
Say hello to my little friend! Nice.
That's why I have to thank those who subject themselves to the inevitable hatred that comes from people when they realize a belief they never really questioned is being challenged. And I think in this case, to thank most of all Anna Gunn, a person who suffered a unique level of harassment and disdain for the role she played in this tale. I'm going to leave here today with the concluding line from Gunn's article on her time with Skyler and the reception of her character. The outcome of a decade spent dealing with an increasingly bitter fanbase, sending her anything from hate mail to death threats.
I can't say that I have enjoyed being the center of the storm of Skyler hate, but in the end, I'm glad that this discussion has happened, that it has taken place in public, and that it has illuminated some of the dark and murky corners that we often ignore or pretend aren't still there in our everyday lives.
Hey folks, thanks so much for watching. Sorry for the delay on this one. I rewatched all of Breaking Bad to prep for this, and then I rewatched a bunch of The Sopranos and Mad Men as further prep, and then I played a bunch of XCOM. That wasn't prep, I just did it. But if you'd like to join me in playing it and more during my off time, please check out my regular live stream at twitch.tv/lacksaint. Aside from that, you can also get in touch with me on Twitter at lackingsaint. I hope you all enjoyed this. If so, please consider giving this video a like, subscribing, or sharing it around on Reddit, Twitter, or anywhere else. If you especially like my work, you can help support it by throwing me a buck or two over on Patreon, or Coffee for one-time donations. Either way, it helps keep the channel going. It also gets you in the credit scrolling by now. On top of all the people on this list, I'd like to give a special thanks to A. Recusant, Callan Stein, Connor Dobbs, Kaura Ra, Industrial Robot, Malpatuis, No More Worlds, and Torin the Exile, with an extra special thanks to Leftist Tech Support. Also, one final thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring me on this video. Reminder to check out the link below for an exclusive offer on their service. Other than that, thanks again for watching, love you all, and stay safe. Look, Big Joel, who wears the jumpers now?